everyone. Welcome back to another episode of my podcast. I'm Caroline Chan, and I'm a current rising senior in high school. Today, I had the wonderful opportunity to speak with Miss Liu Kim, the Associate Head for Institutional Programs and Initiatives at Crystal Springs Uplands School, who is stepping into the role as the interim head of middle school next year. In our conversation today, we talk about her journey into educational leadership, what her role, which she calls a hippie, actually entails, the correct forms of productive struggle, along with so much more. And I can't wait to share with you all what we discussed. So let's get into it. So, yeah, thank you so much again for coming on and speaking with me today. I really appreciate it. So
Sure.
first, to get started, I wanted to ask a bit about you and your background in
Yeah.
education. So, when I was kind of looking at the work you did within
Mhm.
education, I saw that you graduated with a degree in English and environmental studies
Yes.
and even started working as a physical scientist. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And I was wondering, so you did you know that you wanted to pursue education and what made you decide to take this path?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that question. It's a really great question. I think also speaks to, I feel like what happens a little bit in college, which is, exploring so many different interests and passions without necessarily having like one specific job in mind after graduation. So I was not on track necessarily to pursue education when I was in college. Like you noted, I was working for the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. I was actually doing like a career experience program with them. So I started the summer before my senior year and did it throughout my senior year of college. I actually graduated a semester early from college, and so that gave me the flexibility to keep working more fully in the second semester of my senior year with EPA. And at the time, I was actually just really interested in food sustainability specifically when thinking about environmental issues. And so I was on a team of six people that handled, in the federal government, like people who handle applications for to the government for emergency pesticide use. It's like so specific. And I don't think many people have probably even heard of that being a thing. And would probably be a little shocked that like the department has six people. And so in the end, though, I discovered that as much as I liked the people I was working with, I liked working kind of at a federal level. I
Mhm.
did feel too far removed from like direct positive impact.
I see.
And so I thought about my experiences, in college and as well in high school. I was doing different teaching things, right? I like was a Sunday school teacher at my church. I was tutoring in public schools in Boston when I was in college. And so those moments really came to mind when I thought about like what it means to have an impactful career. So I feel like I kind of did take a risk. I ended up pursuing education full time after college. And, reflecting back, that was 16 years ago now. But I'm really glad that I pivoted to end up where I am today. And I think it just showcases that, you know, college is a time to be able to explore. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll know for sure, but life leads you to the things that I think really speak to your heart and mind in terms of your passions and what you'd like to be able to do in life.
That's really powerful what you just said. Yeah, and I wanted to share well, thank you for sharing first of all.
Yeah.
That's so cool that you were doing all that before you went into education. But
Yeah.
I definitely resonate with what you said because I feel like going into freshman year of high school, I thought I was going to be science, lab,
Yeah.
research, chemistry. But then
Yeah.
over time, even with Ask and kind of just
Yeah.
leading clubs and I don't know, teaching underclassmen how to do sciencey stuff and
Yeah.
stuff like that, I kind of also realized that I kind of liked other things and
Yeah. And you're good at all the, right? Like you have other things that you're also good at, Caroline. So I'm really glad that you're pursuing some of those other areas of interest too.
thank you. And yeah, kind of building off of my previous
Yeah.
question, I was wondering once you decided to go on the path of education,
Yeah.
what has your journey been like? Because I know you've been working in this field for a really long time.
Yeah. I started off teaching middle school English in New Haven, Connecticut. I did that for 6 years before transitioning. Kind of like my husband was starting grad school, so that's what brought us to the Bay Area. And so in that transition felt like the right time to also transition. I had been working on my credential to be an administrator, or I was doing a prep program to potentially be a principal. It was a master's program. And so I ended up being a principal. I was an assistant principal first, and then the principal of the school I was working in a charter school in Oakland. And so I feel like those were really, really impactful and important experiences to like kind of where I am today with Crystal and working in the independent school sector. And I think so much of my drive in education has stayed true from when I started, which is that, everyone is entitled to a strong education. I feel like it is really a fundamental right for all kids. And it's a future that allows for like happiness and purpose. And so I think that those have been the biggest motivators for me in staying in this field is I know that the work is so impactful. And even just, from my own family's like journey and history, like the value of education is really high. Um, and I'm hopeful that that's something that we can really showcase and demonstrate for kids moving forward, that this is an experience that they want to make the most out of it, and that it's really important that everyone actually has a really strong educational foundation before they move on to their careers and future life into adulthood.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I'd say definitely like going through and like teaching kids because I also teach at like a Sunday Mandarin program and I
Yeah.
do like volunteering and I think yeah, what you just said like the importance of education definitely can shape the way
Yeah.
someone perceives like a subject. Like for example, with the Mandarin teaching, like the way they were taught Mandarin completely changed their like understanding and passion.
Mm,
And yeah, that's super cool. And I also saw that you went to the Teachers College in Columbia. Is
yes.
that correct? And I was
Yeah.
like,
Right.
what is that? What was that like? And like, what did you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a fantastic experience. It was so I joined that when I was still in the classroom. It was a program that was a 14-month long program where I was in person in intensive, like full-time school essentially for the 2 summers on either side before I transitioned to be an assistant principal. And then during the year, doing papers, doing class, like online class. And so it was a lot, right, to manage doing that. And some of our packet, Chris will do that in terms of, pursuing education while you're working full time. And I think it was really valuable on multiple fronts. I did their program that's called Summer Principals Academy. And the title is for people that want to be principals. And so um, I think that that really impacted kind of my path in terms of solidifying that, when I was a classroom teacher, I was able to take on different leadership roles within that, similar to, a department chair. And what I found was that, it was something that I enjoyed doing, right? Being able to like work with other adults for the purpose of making sure that the student experience and learning is fantastic. And so kind of being able to scale that a little bit and think about how I can have that impact at a whole school level was really exciting. And my program was fantastic. I had really great teachers or great faculty. I had great peers. Our what would be considered kind of like a similar to a dissertation, but not at that level, right? It's just your master's project at the end was to um, open up a school, right? So my six, we were a group of six, came up with this charter school. Like we had to do the motions of like as if we were like really applying, like but really built the school from vision onward in terms of all the aspects of programming. And it's really cool. One of my peers, Priscilla, she actually opened the school. So the
Oh
school
God.
is currently in New York based on what we had like ideated
Wow.
when we were all in grad school together. Yeah, she kept the logo that we came up with. She
That's
like kept
so
the
cool. Oh
name.
my God.
Yeah. And
That was
so
kind of like your capstone
yeah,
project.
that was the capstone essentially.
And then
And we had to defend it, right? It was like the six of us on stage having to defend it. And it was great. I mean, it was a really great experience. And I learned so much. I mean, that's where actually a lot of my skills around like data comes from because that was a specific course as part of my program. We actually also, it was really cool. The program really also valued the fact that administrators, like self-care is an important part of being an administrator. And so my class, I actually had a class called mindfulness.
oh
And
wow.
so like, that was a course. And it was taught by Mark Brackett, who's actually this, he leads a lot of the charge in terms around mental health in schools. He oversees, I don't know if he actually still oversees it, but there's a program that comes out of Yale called Ruler, and
Mhm.
he was the founder of that. And so it was really cool to just be in a space where, you know, it's really intense to be working in schools at all levels. And then particularly for principals, there's just so much that you carry in that role.
Mhm.
And so the fact that there was a course dedicated to what it means to like take care of yourself when you're in situations by leveraging mindfulness is something that I still use today.
Wow, that's so cool. Wait, just like I love the what you touched on mental
Yeah.
health. Just like out of curiosity, what was the
Yeah.
school in New York called? I was just curious.
Yeah, my program or the
Like the school you said you like designed and
oh, it's called Elm Charter School.
Elm
Yeah, it's in Queens.
Oh wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's Elm Community Charter School. So it's called Elm Charter School. So yeah, but that logo is what we used on our capstone project.
I love
But to
that.
be Priscilla's like her friend was the one who made that logo, so it's like totally has the right to use as needed. But yeah, that was the title. Like we called it Elm Charter School, and she ended up calling it Elm Community Charter School. But yeah, it's great. It was great because it was because Teachers College is in New York.
Mhm.
We were basing the school that we were IDing in New York.
And then it actually worked out. That's
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
Wait, sorry, I kind of went like off topic.
No, no, that's great.
What you were
No, but
saying.
this is like when learning comes to life, right? It's actually
Yeah,
really exciting when that
yeah,
happens.
that's insane. Yeah. And kind of like going back to what you were saying about mental health, like I
Yeah.
think that's super interesting. And I know that you worked as a principal for
Yeah.
many years. And like I was wondering throughout like the process of leading a school and being like
Mhm.
taking on such a major leadership role, like what
Yeah.
like some struggles or like lessons that you learned throughout the process.
Yeah, I think that some of the lessons that I learned was around just really being confident in like why we go into administration, which is like we know that we have like passion and skill set that intersect to be able to support like a school. And so I think that the piece that I really loved is like, you're one step removed from students oftentimes. I was still doing some like reading instruction when I was in my administrative roles at my last school. But that it's so important that, like students are really at the center of the work and the why behind all of the decisions. Like it's so important that that's really at the forefront. And then obviously, the faculty and staff I was working with before Crystal when I was a principal, and when I think of PAC, right, at Crystal, is that the adults also need to be like cared for so that they can then show up as in their best selves as students. And a lot of the same kind of practices apply around like what it means to engage like our teachers are like constantly learning and curious and evolving their practice to serve kids. And so like there is this human nature about curiosity and creativity that I really hope that I was able to foster in my last setting, like both for the students that we were working with and the adults. And I think another big lesson is that, it really requires you to have a strong like team. I think that I've been really fortunate. My experiences at Crystal have been similar in that I've felt like I've been a part of like a really strong leadership team. And you really need that because you can't, even as a principal, like so much weight is on you in terms of responsibility and ownership for the school. And you can't do that work alone.
For
Right?
sure.
That work is done in collaboration. And the most successful teams are the ones where, like a principal or a leader is able to leverage the strengths of everyone on that team to be able to make the school the best that it can be. And so I think that I've had a really collaborative approach to how I show up in leadership spaces. And that's what I hope to continue to do when I'm head of middle school next year.
Yay. Also, congrats again on the role. And I'm excited to work with you. And I actually had a question. Are you still, it's kind of like ask related
Yeah.
to like,
Yeah.
I know you're currently the associate head for institutional
Yes.
programs and initiatives.
Yeah.
And are you still continuing that role while being the head of school or?
Yeah, we're not replacing the role. And so what's happening is I'm taking aspects of the role. So I will actually continue to hold strategic planning, institutional research, and experiential ed,
Mhm.
partly because I'm already in that work. And the role for head of middle school is currently an interim role for next year. So without knowing fully what that looks like, it's just the AHIP role is actually really hard to fill. It's pretty unique in what it is. And so I am really fortunate that I'll get to hopefully work with Ask on like, yeah, the portrait of graduates, or like definite expanding your definitions of excellence, all of the great work that's already happening. I'm excited to like have this synergy between my current role and then my new role. Um, and then some other aspects of my work, like athletics, fine arts productions, are being held by other members of the PAC.
Wow, that sounds like a lot, but like
Yeah.
that's cool how you're able to hold both roles at once. And like kind of building off what you were saying about like your work as the is like the abbreviation AHIPI or
Yeah, I call it a hippie just so that it's easier to say.
I love that.
But
So
yeah.
fun. So as like a hippie,
Yeah.
like what are some like of the major things you tackle? Because I think a lot of students really just like aren't seeing what you do from day to day.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what ways do you impact both like the student experience at Crystal and just like Crystal in general as a whole?
Yeah. I think the one thing people have gotten a chance to see sort of, right, is that I do manage our like our large institutional surveys. And so much of data decision making leverages that as one really important data point. It's not the only data point, right? Just to be clear that, we're obviously going to make strategic decisions not just off of surveys, but everything that we're seeing, a lot of other data points and observations. But I think that's a really important part of my work that is on the right, more behind the scenes. I think strategic planning wise, like I feel really fortunate. We have really strong leadership at Crystal, right? So from the senior leadership team, middle school leadership team, upper school leadership team. I currently have been co-leading the DEI leadership team as well. And so I think in all of these leadership spaces, there's an element that requires us to pay attention to like whether or not we are kind of prioritizing things that will move us forward in our strategic plan. And so that's a lot of the work I carry is a lot of working with our leadership team on that. Um, and then again, like the AHIP role is so unique because part of why I'm holding other, like the co-curriculars, right? There's experiential ed, which I will continue to hold because half of experiential ed, like the experiential ed work is actually held divisionally, right? Like this includes community engagement,
Like
all
the
of the trips, yeah, everything. Miss Clark will still report to me, and all of that work is something that because half of it is middle school anyway, it kind of made sense to keep. But I think that the pieces are that I was also holding. Again, we also have strong directors at Crystal, so we're really like Miss Clark is fantastic. Like all of the people that I'm working with are really strong, and so it's a lot of me supporting, making sure to give institutional perspective on what we are considering, and then just supporting them and executing on that work. Right. So I'm the second administrator with Miss Clark every time a trip goes to be like if there's any needs or if there's
so much.
support needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
like
And then
as you're talking,
athletics,
it's like, oh my God, you do this, you do that. You're also
yeah. And
like,
then like athletics is again a unique one and athletics partly comes from like the fact, I was a collegiate athlete. And so like I just feel like there's all these intersections of like what what I was passionate about that allowed me to craft the AHP role was new when I came into it. It was an evolution of the chief of staff role to do more strategy. And then um yeah, and then fine arts productions. The school where I taught was actually an arts magnet school.
oh,
And
wow.
so I have a huge passion for the arts as well. I was an English teacher in that setting, but right, like when you're in an art school, I think that it really allows you to see the value in a really important way for students and how they can really thrive in as a whole, their whole selves when they get to have an arts experience. And so I was really excited to hold that part. But yeah, I
Oh,
think like the AHIP role, similar to the chief of staff role, actually holds a lot of different areas dependent on really like what's needed for the school. So the reason I held those things is because they were previously partly held by divisional heads. And again, we're kind of returning to that structure a little bit since I'm going into divisional head role. But that with the idea that at the time, 2 years ago, those were areas that really needed some support, right? That needed right everything that I mean you've been here like at the upper school now for a few years to see the work around the global travel and what that has looked like since probably your freshman year to now,
mhm.
and then for particularly for community engagement, all of the work in that area. If you go to the middle school now, like you'll really see, and we're really building that up for the upper school as well.
Wow. Wait, that's so cool. Thank you for sharing all that. And like this sounds like really straightforward, but like you're such a cool person. Like I feel like you do so much. Like you're an athlete, you do like environmental stuff, you're in
Yeah,
education. Like that's really cool. And
thanks.
honestly, I feel like we should like you should like present to Crystal students about your role or something because
Oh,
I feel like you're involved in so much. And I don't know, that's just like I feel like you people hear the role like a hippie and like they don't really know it. It's like
yeah, yeah.
we only
Well,
see
we made it up at Crystal, so
I was wondering, like, you were originally the chief of
yeah.
staff, And like, what did you do in that role? And like, how did that, because you said it kind of evolved
Yeah.
through like strategic planning, right? So like, how
Yeah.
did it kind of shift during your
Yeah.
school?
Yeah. Chief of staff is also really cool because again, similar to like it's a chief of staff in a school setting is really unique.
Hmm.
I really loved it. Because similar to kind of what I was expressing, like you get to actually see so many different facets of the school because essentially you're operating with like head of right, Kelly is head of school. She's managing a lot of different things. And so it's to support primarily the head of school to
Uh-huh.
be able
That's Mr.
to,
Alexander's role.
yes, right. That's now Adora's, yeah, Mr. Alexander's role. And so, and part of the work actually changes year to year, right? So, like, for example, Mr. Alexander this year, like the mansion project was something that he was involved in. But when I was chief of staff, that wasn't, that was like an idea in terms of trying to maybe do something down the road for renovation, but wasn't a part of my work because we weren't in that era yet.
Hmm.
And so, chief of staff really does some like manages projects that are institutionally important. So at the time when I was actually in my first year, we didn't have really an HR department my first year for a human resources. Like right now we have Ms. Chu's the director of human resources and Mr.
Wow.
Talbot who
This
oversees
is
that,
like
right? Like
if I never get to like I didn't even know Crystal like schools had HR and like
yeah, yes, right. Because we have a lot of employees, we have a lot of right in terms of supporting people and hiring and all those things. And so, and HR, it's so in the background, right? A lot of the chief of staff work is like work in the background, but that was an area of need for us. So I really supported that area and held a lot of projects around that area. So like things like grants that teachers apply for,
Mhm.
hiring, like all of those pieces were things I got to like project manage because we didn't have we had a gap in that.
So you
And then the chief
really, oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. No, no, go ahead.
But like you do this like you work basically really closely with Miss Sortino in terms of that,
Yeah.
what how you're saying. Uh,
Yeah, exactly. And then there's actually distinct events that the chief of staff is responsible for. And this has evolved a little bit over time. It's always been collaborative, but I think there's been some shift to so that's not as much the chief of staff owns, but 612 events, so which actually includes divisional events, but like you need consistency across the two. So back to school nights, graduation commencement,
mhm,
convocation. So like those events, even snow day, right? Like the chief of staff actually manages 612 events.
mhm,
Um, and so that's a big part of the role. And
mhm,
then a final part of the role that is really important is, or actually, there's two more parts that are really important, are that the chief of staff gets to work with the board of trustees. So they're really like the operational person working with the board of trustees. And that just gives you so much insight in terms of like the board really makes strategic decisions, right? With, Kelly as head of school, right? But that's something where you like having a seat at that table to be able to really see what's going on is really, really impactful. And then the final piece is that the chief of staff also is part of the senior leadership team and holds their own projects, but then supports other SLT members as needed if there are projects that require, right, like more institutional support. And yeah, so a lot of what I was able to bring in my hippie role comes from like all of the learning I had in the chief of staff role. And I think other PAC would say this, right? People would often come to me to like ask about random, like if they didn't know who to go to,
mhm,
they would oftentimes ask me, and I would usually be able to answer or point them in the right direction. And that's because you really have a bit of a hand in so many things behind the scenes.
mhm.
And so it was a great experience. Again, the a hippie role kind of came from that role in terms of wanting to own more strategy though, like the institutional research fell under that and then co-curriculars. And
Wow,
so it was really an expansion based on the chief of staff role.
that's so cool. And were they like just like out of curiosity, were they like things that you identified and wanted to pursue? Or, like how did this growth happen? And like
For the co-curriculars, for example, being
yeah,
added or
yeah.
institutional research. Yeah, I think that it was a combination of both things that I had some experience with and then also like a need for the school. So I think at the time I'd mentioned that the divisional head, so even like things like athletics, right, fine arts productions and experiential ed, those are programs across both divisions.
And then divisional heads would be like the head of the arts department. The is
Yeah,
that
so the division heads are the people who like the department, so the department chair, where all the faculty report to the divisional heads,
and the department chairs are divisional heads.
are the department chairs are faculty who take on leadership for the department, right?
Okay.
So
Right, it's just
yeah. No,
Crystal.
no, that's okay. So Mr. Thompson is a science department chair for the upper school, and then right, Miss Tomatis is the English department chair, right? And so there's a department chair who's a faculty member
I
who
see.
who takes on leadership to represent that department. And the divisional head, right, the head of middle school and the head of upper school, right, they really oversee faculty as a whole.
And that's divisional head.
And
Like,
that's divisional. Yeah. And so like the associate, my role, Miss Berman's role, like there's a lot of roles at SLT that are actually across 612. Actually, yeah, most of the roles are across grades 6 through 12, working across both campuses.
I
So the
see.
associate head role works kind of the in collaboration with Miss Sortino's head of school, the divisional heads who were staying most recent, or she's still in it until June 30th, and then Miss Carlton, and
Mhm.
then Miss Berman is a really key part of that as well as the assistant head for advancement and strategy. I feel like because our work is so much, her work and my work are so much around tying in kind of what is the 612 experience and making sure that there's coherence across that.
I see. Okay. Thank you so much for explaining.
Yeah.
Like, I just like learned so much through like everything.
I
And I
know.
have more questions, but like for the sake of time, I don't want to go too much over time.
Yeah,
So,
no problem.
yeah, I'm just gonna move on.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, like, now that you're stepping into the head of middle school role
Yeah.
and with your like extremely like long and extensive experience in education and like the new advent of AI coming in, it's like, how are you gonna, like, as the head of the middle school, how are you gonna manage like the well-being and success
Yeah.
of students and like make sure they've experienced productive struggle even
Yeah.
with like AI? Because I know that's something
Yeah.
that Ask did a lot this year with the middle school.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I love leveraging like the student voice, like ask, right, and really understanding our student experience. I mean, I think when it comes to productive struggle, the key really is the word productive, right? Like that's actually how we ensure we're paying attention to student well-being while maintaining like high expectations and managing and navigating complex nuances like AI in this current era where, there's not a clear answer for everything that in terms of how to there's not one right way, right, necessarily to navigate it as it continues to evolve. But I think the other thing to recognize, right, is like something like productive struggle should look different, like student to student, right? Like what feels like a productive struggle point for one student is gonna vary. And so I think that teachers really have to know each student well, which I think is a strength for Crystal faculty overall.
Mm.
And I think one thing that we continue to emphasize at Crystal and why we bring up, and the fact that the rebranding of like we have directors of student wellness, like for
Mhm.
this real value that we place around right mental health and wellness. And the key thing that we really share, with all of our pack that I think translates across our community is that the most growth that we'll really see from students is when they actually are well and feel supported, right? Like that's the part that we have to make sure we recognize as a school. Like what's the line between a kid productively struggling versus just struggling, and like how do we adjust to make sure it's right size for that student. And it's tough work, but it's really one of the most important and rewarding aspects of being an educator, and Crystal is like a fantastic place where I feel like that is a part of what we're continuing to grow in. And again, with this mindset that Crystal faculty are just curious learners themselves, and I think have varying degrees of like what the AI experience has been in the classroom.
I've like spoken with so many different perspectives.
Yeah.
It's crazy, yeah.
And so I think that, it really does call to question, and make us really confront the like what is the crux and core of like what teaching and learning is, right? I think like these are AI, right, as a tool, and how do we leverage it? And how do we ensure, right, that when we think about productive struggle and mental health and wellness, like they actually should go well together if we're at the right juncture of what the productive struggle is.
So it's kind of like even though productive struggle is kind of unique for all students, it's still like kind of finding the balance
Yeah.
between struggle and like learning efficiently. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. There's like a zone, right, of that where that learning can really happen, so that you're not just so that you don't shut down, right? Like I think that that's the key. And if we actually equip kids or students with like to recognize and be aware of their own like mental health, it's actually easier than for them to be able to voice like what that line is for them of when they're feeling like it's productive versus just challenging to a point where it actually causes them issues.
Yeah, definitely like developing that awareness and
Yeah,
kind of tying into what like the academic student council is looking into next
yeah,
year. I
yeah.
we have a new committee which is like the mental health and kind of
Mm,
mainly in relationship with like academic stress and academic pressure and kind of just like exploring that and helping students like know themselves and like providing them the resources. Like we're gonna work with Miss Carlton,
it's
like
great.
the director of wellness, and like maybe even with you on
Yeah,
that. So yeah,
yeah,
I'm
that's
excited for
fantastic.
that as well.
Awesome.
And yeah, like what you just shared. I think that's super cool. Like the intersection between mental health and like struggle and learning. And
Yeah.
also that's so interesting, like viewing teachers as learners. Like I've never really thought about it that way before. I've always thought about it as like teachers teach and then students learn. But like yeah,
Yeah.
that's very interesting. And I know we're a bit over time, but is it okay if I ask one
Yeah.
final
Yeah.
question?
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
so the final question I have for you is like if you could tell your high school self one thing that you know today throughout all your experience, what would it be? And do you have like building off of that, do you have any advice for current students or like leaders?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great question. I'm like reflecting on everything I've shared today. I'm like, oh, did I model this well? But because I think the one thing that comes up for me is around like not trying to do it all. Like I had a really great high school experience and I went to a really small high school, actually smaller than Crystal. And so I was able to take on so many leadership roles. I mean, this kind of happens at Crystal too, right? Like you get to be a captain of a sports team. I was the yearbook editor, I was student gov president, like all of those things. And I grew so much. And I don't want to say like I regret those experiences because I did grow from them. But like looking back, I really wish I could have told myself like it's actually okay to not try to do it all. Because in reality, there's also this piece around like being a little bit community centered in my thinking too. Like I would have realized that if I had stepped out of certain roles, I actually would have created space for others to step in and
Mhm.
have those experiences. And I think I would have still gotten the same amount of like joy and like skill building from focusing on like one or two areas. And again, like not with any regret for what I was able to get out of everything. But when you go to a small school like I did or like Crystal, it can be really easy to take on like too much and to potentially lose sight of really what's important to you, what's good for the community. And so my advice is really just like pay attention, like be self-aware, pay attention to your motivation, to the community, and try to not do it all for the sake of like your own sustainability, but also with the community in mind.
I see. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think I definitely kind of resonate with what you said about like, doing everything. Yeah, but like that's a perspective I never really thought about, like giving opportunities to others and like
Yeah.
I don't know, like something I've learned junior year, like even throughout, because I feel like I do a good amount of leadership roles with
Yeah.
clubs, ask affinity space,
Yeah.
but it's kind of like another aspect has been like mentoring younger students,
Yes.
like, bringing them up to replace you once you
Yeah.
graduate. And that's like when I first like started doing leadership, like my first time being a club vice president, I never like anticipated that as being like,
Mm.
because I feel like honestly that's like equally as important as doing
Yeah.
the leadership yourself.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, I think
Yeah.
even with that, I think that's super like something that's really important that I've learned throughout leadership. But like definitely the whole like making sure I'm not stretching myself too thin, like
Yeah.
what you were saying, that's definitely
Yeah, and well, something else you just shared, I think, is also a really important thing that there's like a quote that I saw recently. I'm not going to attribute it correctly, and I'm probably going to like mess up the quote entirely, but it's along the lines of like, like leadership is actually about building other leaders, not followers. Like, so a lot of like what I feel like I see you doing, Caroline, like especially through Ask, but I'm sure in other areas, is that you're actually facilitating like the opportunities for others to also like build their skills so that they can take on leadership.
Mhm.
And so I think that is in a really like that is community centered, right? That is thinking about like it beyond just you and like what you're getting out of the experience. And so I think that that is the right way to approach how to think about being in leadership is around how are you also facilitating that for other students, for other people to be able to develop their capacities so that way they can take on the really meaningful work that like a school, right? We're like, we're gonna, I'm hoping to stay at Crystal till retirement, but whatever happens that like, all of our students, like you'll leave right after 12th grade. We'll want to make sure you have what you need to feel prepared for moving on, but that like the ecosystem of the school needs to continue. And
Mhm.
so part of the like responsibility is the legacy that you leave for other leaders. So
Yeah.
that's a really important point.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, thank you so much for talking. Okay, so I hope you all enjoyed my wonderful conversation with Miss Kim. A huge thank you to Miss Kim for taking the time to speak with me, and thank you all so much for listening. I'll see you guys next time.